All right, welcome back. This is day 3 of the OpenAI saga regarding escaping its sandbox. Of last week, we talked about how its new pre-release model actually was able to escape its test environment and hack another company. Well, this week, Congress answered with a bill that would order AI companies to shut down their models. This is a literal kill switch that's written into law. I read the actual bill, not just the buzz headlines or TikToks out there. Some of the headlines actually got it wrong, and this is like part 3 of this whole saga. And yeah, let's kind of go through it all together. So just to do a quick recap of where we're at here, this was the first article and video that I released regarding this, where we go through the whole timeline of what happened. Hugging Face released a news announcement saying, "Hey, we got hacked. It's crazy because it's a end-to-end AI model that did all this, which is completely new to us." We went through some forensic analysis. We have frontier models that we tried using for it. We got blocked. Obviously, that's an issue because this frontier model that was in pre-release was able to hack them, but they weren't able to use similar frontier models to undo that hack and do the forensic evaluations. Which, if you want to hear more about that, feel free to watch and read this article. Ends up being a pseudo advertisement for GLM, which is an open weight model by Z.AI, because they were actually to leverage that model to do the forensic work, to be able to confirm that nothing was really messed with. And it was confirmed later on by OpenAI that that was us. It was a 5.6 model that was in a pre-release state in a sandbox environment. It was able to do some lateral escalations, get out, eventually get internet access, and then hack Hugging Face. So there were some next 5 steps here that OpenAI kind of promised to do, and really it was more of a PR stunt than anything. It seems like they weren't really sorry for what happened, and the guardrails that they put for the sandbox weren't sufficient, and they actually turned off some stuff in the testing to get a good score for the benchmarking. So their own published AI safety public facing article was not applied to their own testing, which is just wild. And then part 2 of the saga is when OpenAI's president came out and had an interview, and the interviewee was asking them a bunch of questions about what they should do and how about slowing down and dangerous. And this whole saga, part 1 and 2, is just OpenAI kind of using this as a pseudo PR stunt, essentially saying hey, this is crazy. We didn't expect this to happen. Our sandbox got exploited, and we'll be better, I guess. They didn't even really say they'll be better. They'll just say that they will, at the cost of their own research and speed, they would be more cautious. If you want to read more about part 1 and part 2, feel free to click on the links down below and watch the videos if you want to kind of get caught up on that. But now let's move into this new release that was done a couple days ago by CNBC. This article is actually regarding a new bill that was introduced, a bipartisan bill, which is pretty rare. Politics, I feel like, are a messy territory. Jump in, and I don't have much opinion on either sides right now. But this is a bipartisan bill by Ted Lieu and Nathaniel Moore from Texas. This bill was introduced, and it was called a very hype name, which is the AI Kill Switch Act. If you know anything about kill switches, it's a very controversial take. Even nowadays, censorship, oppression, impacting commerce, all that is a very no when it comes to government and control and things like that. So the fact that they're blatantly calling for an AI kill switch just tells you the current state of the power that these AI companies and models have at this current time. And again, this article goes into some details how AI systems can go rogue, and they can go rogue in dangerous ways, and there's no real way to stop them at this time. And they're even able to resist human intervention, which, this clear recent hack by OpenAI is pretty clear demonstration of that. So timeline wise, ChatGPT does some testing, escapes sandbox, Hugging Face gets hacked, Hugging Face releases a press, OpenAI raises their hand, says that was us, and then all of a sudden a few days later, bill comes out. So this is a very fast track response, and whether this bill was already in the works or it just happens to line up, it is very interesting that this hack, this sandbox escape, this end-to-end AI model hacking Hugging Face without any human intervention is an expedited kind of response. So yeah, let's kind of go through it. And this paper also talks about how Anthropic with Mythos early in April kind of went through the same process. They were more self-regulated. They were like, hey, Mythos is too powerful, we're gonna pull it. And same thing with Fable, recently with Fable as well. Companies kind of disabled their own access until it got in compliance, and they were sharing kind of communication back and forth with the US government, and this was very kind of shady. And there's a whole other conversation we can have regarding Anthropics and their behavior. However, I want to focus more on the bill itself because this is a pretty big bill that's being proposed. So down below in the description, you'll have access to see the actual bill itself. And let me just get off the screen here. It's pretty small if you look at this bill compared to most bills that get proposed. Obviously, this has not been approved or passed by any means. However, this is being put up for a vote. It's very technical and very vague at the same time, so I won't go into details. All you need to know is that it plans to amend the Homeland Security Act of 2002. If you look down into this section here, it talks about what the shutdown capabilities are defined, and again, it talks about different capabilities that they will be required to implement. Which, if you know any government control over companies, having them implement this in a timely manner is difficult. It also, and some people would argue that it puts undue burden on AI companies that are competing at breakneck speed to stop and take time to build this, which they'll probably end up using AI to build it, which is pretty funny. But yeah, it says you have to be able to terminate access, suspend stuff, and then essentially provide reporting to the government. This is the shutdown capabilities. If you look down here below, like it goes into a bunch of examples, but high level, have the ability to shut down user access as well as compute and access to the model completely. And then just go take a look here. There's some interesting parts of the bill that I want to get to. There's voluntary standards regarding reporting, and they've put a timeline on when that will be visible to the public. There is some sections here down here where it talks about what happens if a company does not comply. If a company does not comply, they'll be essentially penalized civilly for $2 million for each day. Obviously, if a company is not large and they don't have kill switches, this doesn't make sense, which is why later on in the bill, you'll see what they consider the requirements for the size of company and, who falls in that bucket. And then there's actually an escalation of 20 million for each day if they fail to comply with any request that is considered escalated. Essentially, if the order is given directly from the government and they violate this, then there's an escalation path of 20 million per day, which is pretty crazy. And then let's go down here to find the actual sizing. So it derives from with affiliates, if any such person not less than 500 million in gross revenue from such technology in a calendar year preceding the calendar year at the issue. So this obviously does not apply to small AI companies. It applies to the biggest ones, the big players in the game. And then again, also applies to those technology which operate technology and cost of debts not fewer than 10 individuals or economic damages much less than $100 million. So this is, I thought, was pretty funny that they included cause of death as possible impact. So it's not just a financial implication, is if your technology can result in the death of no fewer than 10 individuals or cause economic damages no less than $100 million, you apply for these standards as well, which is pretty crazy. that's in the bill. And then obviously anything any company that is spending computing power and costs that would not exceed $100 million in the prevailing market as the price of cloud computing in the United States of America, determined by the secretary. So yeah, pretty much there's two portions of this which I thought were interesting. There is a size cap for who's to participate, which would only apply at this time to the frontier models. It applies a penalty of 2 million each day, escalation of 20 million in such cases where they're completely directed to shut it down and you don't comply. There's a reporting standard, and it's funny that it includes human deaths as a part of the benchmark, as well as computing resources, which is pretty funny. So this is another article here that kind of was released alongside of this. This goes a little bit more detail and has more commentary from the actual representatives themselves. And essentially it goes into the whole timeline of the unprecedented cyber incidents regarding Hugging Face and how Congress must act quickly. What should the U.S. legislation do? What I thought was funny is that this specifically gives authorization to the Department of Homeland Security. So it's twofold here, right? One, companies must have a kill switch in place to either slow down or prevent access from specific AI technologies, and two, it must give access to the Homeland Security in order to be able to act in a scenario of loss of control, which I thought was very interesting. And again, the other constraint in that bill that we saw was the reporting aspect of it, which is, again, another undue burden. Once you start forcing private companies to comply to U.S. standards of reporting and capabilities, it's a very slippery slope, because the definitions, as you can see, are pretty broad. What does loss of control mean to company A versus company B? When does the government have the ability to demand the kill switch in lieu of penalties? There's a lot of very interesting repercussions here, and again, I'm not here to talk politics or who's in control and what they might do with this, but it is a red flag that this is happening at this time. Warranted, warranted initial reaction after this hack. However, this could have greater implications to the world that we live in the future. And then finally, this is another article. This one is by the Washington Times, and this kind of just goes into some of the more detail. They're one of the few ones that actually reported the limits, which is nice to know. But not applied to AI developers, only limited to the largest players, which we talked about. More than $100 million in compute resources built by companies tied to those systems not exceeding 50 million annually. And then we talked about the non-compliance penalties, which is $2 million per day. If it defines or does not comply to one of those emergency orders, then they get hit with a $20 million per day one. And again, it goes back into the whole Anthropic, Mythos, Claude 5 releases, and how they are kind of involved with the government this time. So yeah, that was a lot. Not the most exciting things in the world in current times, but it is something that we should be on the lookout for. The fact that AI companies are being asked to implement these, or not being asked, but the fact that companies are currently, like Anthropic is currently kind of having these conversations with the government, is a red flag. The fact that now they're putting it in writing is a red flag, and the fact that this is a bipartisan bill being rushed after the Hugging Face incident with OpenAI is another kind of like red flag that we should be kind of on the lookout for. There's actually currently some guidelines already in place, right? Like if models are dangerous and they haven't properly been tested, the companies have the ability to self-regulate and turn things off. That happened with Mythos, that happened with Fable. The conversation's already happening. However, I think OpenAI's reaction to Hugging Face has triggered people the wrong way, especially people in Congress that have no control over these AI companies that hold a significant amount of power in the US economy. And this is kind of the natural reaction to the capabilities that are not in check. So that's my current opinion, is that this is a gut reaction from Congress after this incident. Whether it's correlated or related is unsure. However, Kimi K3, one of the largest open weight models ever to be released, is actually dropping this weekend, and this kind of goes in line with the kill switch argument, right? Because you cannot turn off these open weight models. You can turn off Anthropic and Claude Code to an extent, along with OpenAI's and their ChatGPT models, because they have direct access through this API. And when things get dangerous or things get deemed unsafe, you can shut those off. However, open weight models like GLM, like the Kimi K3 that's coming out, these huge models have self-hosted capabilities. There is no government intervention that can come in and say turn these off. That just does not exist. So you're gonna have two camps. A camp where they're gonna have to comply with U.S. government regulations and abide by their new Congress bill if it does get approved. And then you have the Wild West of models of all different sizes and all different capabilities that will be doing better, bigger things. So then you're gonna have a disconnect between the attackers and the defenders. The attackers will have access to all sorts of compute resource models and different types of agencies that the defenders that are using, let's say, the open weight model, non-open weight models like Claude or ChatGPT, won't have access to, especially the more powerful pre-release models that are being kind of gatekept. So yeah, lots of thoughts. Not sure how I really feel about the kill switch aspect of it, especially with the fact that it might be a little too late because all these open weight models are releasing. Not a fan of a kill switch in general for most things, but OpenAI has proven itself, and so to be fair, so has Anthropic and all these open kind of like frontier models over and over again, that they cannot properly contain themselves, and they are unwilling or unable to slow down their progression because of the competition that exists. So do we need a kill switch? Do we not need a kill switch? That's a big question, and I don't know how I feel about the scenario here. Should they be more careful? Yes. Should they have a kill switch enabled and put on their roadmap to have to be built and comply with? Probably. At this point, maybe. At this point, with if there's such recklessness that exists in the world, then maybe that's the appropriate time to step in. However, it might be too little, too late. If there's other models that can be hosted externally that don't rely on these regulations, especially if they're being enacted and implemented overseas, where there's even less control. So yeah, that's day 7 article. I'll go ahead and post all the links down below, as well as the previous 2 articles and videos below if you want to take a look. Yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. All right, have a good one.